Many on the internet are up in arms over a series of photos that Lil Kim posted on her Instagram page featuring a completely new look. In fact, she's pretty unrecognizable from what she looked like back in the 90s. Now, many people have used this story to put her down, to talk about how she sold out, to talk about how she ruined her looks. But the underlying issue is the pressure to look a certain way, to have lighter skin, and to appeal to this notion that European-looking individuals are more attractive. Now, I think this is a really interesting story, not only because of the fact that she's unrecognizable, but because of what she represented back in the 1990s and how a lot of people that looked up to her, particularly black women, now feel like she kind of let them down because she served as this incredible role model as a black woman. Regardless of what her lyrics are or how vulgar you might think they were, she represented self-confidence. She represented a black woman who wasn't afraid of her sexuality, who wasn't afraid to flaunt it. And to go through a transition of this sort, I think, makes them feel like they were let down. So let me give you some more details on that. There was a great piece written in the Daily Beast by Yaba Blay, and I think she puts this into perspective in the best possible way. She talks about how her lyrics offered us permission to explore our own bodies and our own pleasure. Lil Kim was our champion. Now, she also says, wherever there are people of color, Southeast Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and the United States, there is skin bleaching. And we've talked about that a lot on this show, which is interesting because if you're considered too pale and white, you're kind of pressured to tan, right? Whether it's self-tanners, spray tans, or going under those horrible tanning beds that'll give you cancer. But then if you're considered too dark, there's this pressure to lighten your skin, stay out of the sun. You don't want to get darker, right? Obviously, there's a lot more pressure toward those with darker skin than those with lighter skin, but it's a disaster either way. Also, Yaba Blay says the following: she's admitted to not feeling pretty enough. She's reflected on having lovers cheat on her with women who were more European looking.
So this story breaks my heart a little bit because I want people to be true to themselves, right? At the same time, I recognize that people have plastic surgery and they don't feel any, shame about it. And so it's not on me to put that on people who are getting it. Now, if you watch the show for a while, you've heard me say 1,000 times, my rule is 2 plastic surgeries make sense, right? I haven't had any, but I get it. I get it. If you're self-conscious about it, you got big ears and you want to pin them back or whatever, nobody's going to go ballistic over that, right? But if you overdo it, well, Lil Kim's a good example because who are you, right? I can't even, I don't know who you are anymore, right? So that's not those are not the same people. So you can say inside I'm the same, but okay, I mean, look, to me, the skin color, maybe it's the pictures that make it as stark as it looks. Yeah, she happens to be blonde for now. She'll change her hair color later, et cetera. But look at the nose, right? And so people get nose jobs. We've talked about that on the show, et cetera, right? But are you does it make a difference if you're trying to get a quote unquote whiter nose? I don't know. Am I judging too much if I talk about that? I don't know. But I do know this. Okay, overall macro picture. Couple of things. Look, it's not just racism. Although there is a history of racism in this country that has to be recognized. You think it didn't affect our culture at all? That if you were black, you were a slave and couldn't be free, right? That people who were light-skinned had enormous, unbelievable advantages over people who were not. I mean, it doesn't get any more stark than free slave, right? So that's not what's happening today, but that culture, unfortunately, has affected us through the generations. But then there's also the macro picture. That's why, the writer here talks about Southeast Asia, et cetera, right? So, and part of that was if you were wealthy, you didn't have to be in the field. And so you were paler. That's why the Japanese would put all the white makeup on women, et cetera. Even in my own culture in Turkey, I've told this disturbing story where a woman was super pretty if she was so white that you could see a dark grape go down her throat, which grosses me out every time, okay? So, but that meant because she wasn't in the field. She was wealthy, right? If you're in the field, you're going to get tanned all day, and that's frowned upon. And so all these things exist. And then you've got the mass media where Westerners are so dominant in presenting the culture, right? And that's not a malicious thing. It's just how it turned out so that when Asians look at it and they go, I want to look more Western because all the people in the movies are Western and all the people who are glamorized and in the magazines are Western.
Yeah.
And then you have that here as well from dark-skinned people to light-skinned people. So I know why it happened, but it still breaks my heart.
I know. Okay, so whenever we cover stories like this, of course I get extremely torn, right? Yes, I think there should be some limit on the amount of plastic surgery you get because eventually you're going to do too much and you're not going to look normal. Forget about not looking like yourself. You're just not going to look normal anymore, right? But also at the same time, I know from personal experience, what I did to my face was to make my nose look more quote unquote white, right? Armenians are white, they're Caucasians, but I had a very Armenian nose. And I didn't like it. I didn't feel comfortable looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't feel comfortable on the show. I didn't like my profile. And so it was something that I struggled with ever since I was a kid, right? And I went through phases where I was defiant and I thought, no, my nose represents who I am and I'm not going to change it. But deep down inside, I was still self-conscious and I just didn't like the way it looked, right? And then eventually I decided to do what I've always wanted to do and I got the nose job and I feel great about it. I thought maybe I'll regret it, I don't know, but I ended up loving it. It gave me the confidence that I wanted. It made me feel better in my skin. And so I feel uncomfortable, you know, criticizing someone else who changes his or her features to look more quote unquote white. But at the same time, I think that, you know, I also understand the Black community for being frustrated over this because you have this successful public figure that's proudly flaunting her you know, her race, her sexuality, who she is. She was like the epitome of confidence. And I think a lot of young girls who have darker skin looked up to her and they thought, yeah, you know what? Look at how successful she is. Look at how proud she is of who she is. I can be proud as well. And I can understand why they feel let down with all these new images of her that are posted on social media.
So, look, I don't know that there is such a thing as an Armenian nose. I don't know, right? If I
There's an Armenian nose.
Okay,
I'm an Armenian. I'm going to say it. Come on,
I have
guys.
no idea.
There's an Armenian nose. Love you guys.
Okay.
Keep it at 100.
So, I had issues with my nose. I fixed it by breaking it several times. No, look, to me, there is a difference between a nose job, ears, teeth, whatever, right? Like you've got some sort of issue. It's not looking normal, but yes, at some point, if you do too many plastic surgeries, you look like Catwoman, and it's disconcerting. Sorry, but it is, right? But for whatever reason, I draw the line on bleaching your skin. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't bleach my skin under, you know, threat of violence. I wouldn't do it on a boat. I wouldn't do it on a goat. Mm-hmm. Okay. To me, like what? It's like when the cops arrested me for Democracy Spring, and they wrote down, and I talked about this in a post game for the members. They wrote down complexion brown, and they said, "Ooh, do you mind?" I was like, "No, I don't mind." Right? There's nothing to mind, and so that's why I say it's disappointing to see people trying to. You can argue about noses, I guess, but trying to look more white. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. You just need to be proud of who you are, and that confidence will come through. And yeah, maybe some guys cheated on you with, you know, European-looking girls, whatever. Dude, and if you were white, the guy would have cheated on you with a black girl, okay? Because they're guys. So don't take that personally. Don't make that a thing, right?
I think more than anything, when you are a female celebrity, right, there comes a day when you are, unfortunately, no longer considered attractive by society because you age, right? You get older. And I think that when your fame and your success is partly, not completely, but partly based on the way you looked, and those looks start to fade, I think a lot of women freak out. And that's why you see a lot of female celebrities going under the knife, having too many procedures, and unfortunately, in some cases, ruining the way that they look. And so I understand that. I get what that is. I understand that pressure. I feel that pressure a lot too.
So I'm reading Ben's dad's book, okay, So As I Was Saying, by Frank Mankiewicz. And he's talking about his father, Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane, legendary screenwriter, etc. And it was enormous anti-Semitism back then. And there's still anti-Semitism today, but it was a whole different level back then, right? And so, for example, even Ben's dad, let alone Ben's grandfather, he couldn't take girls to the dance in his high school because they wouldn't let Jews into the club where they were having the prom and the dances. Okay, that's Ben's dad. That's not that far from us, right? But his grandfather, a lot more anti-Semitism, and a lot of people asked him, why didn't you change your name from Mankiewicz to like Mank, right? Something a little bit more, Gentile sounding. And he said, way too many people that had names like Mankiewicz died in too many Holocausts for me to change my name. Okay, and I love that. And
Jesus, that just gave me chills.
yes, so be true to yourself. Okay, don't let anybody tell you who you're supposed to be.